Well, thank you for being here, everybody. It's really great to see community engagement, and I just want to say I'm really appreciative of all of your time for being here and engaging with us. My name's Danelle Hyai. I have been a part of the Parks and Rec Commission since 2021, and I joined the Community Center Task Force to be a part of the process. As a resident, I really wanted to join that task force to empower young women in this redesign. I grew up in residential St. Paul, and my community center was the YMCA off of University. And this was the 90s. It was not a state-of-the-art facility. What I remember about that facility, other than the overwhelming smell of chlorine, was that there was no fitness area. It was a weight room, and only men went to the weight room, and that was it. It was free weights, and it was extremely sweaty. As soon as I was too old to go to the offering of the kids' care, if you will, my siblings would be dropped off, and my dad would make me go to the weight room with him, because it didn't matter that he had the kids that night, he was getting a lift in. But in doing so, he empowered me to understand that that was a space I belonged. It was a space that I was allowed to be, and it didn't matter that not only was I underage and technically not allowed to be in that space, but I was the only female. And I knew as soon as Marshall asked the Parks and Rec Commission for volunteers for this, that I wanted to be a part of that, because in this redesign, though our fitness area is not as bad as a YMCA off University Avenue in the 90s, it is still pretty blocked off, and it is still pretty intimidating. It still is, in many ways, an area where, depending on the time of day, it is a man's area. And I want young women to see a more opening, welcoming fitness area and not feel like they just have to go to the treadmill or to the track or to a stretching area. I want everyone to feel that it's a very accessible space for them. And I think with the whole redesign, we can make the whole building more accessible to a much larger group of our community members. Throughout the task force process, we've gotten to listen to community feedback and really been able to be champions of that feedback. So though you all haven't been involved in every single meeting, all of the feedback is present and discussed in detail and incorporated into the designs that you saw tonight. And it's been an honor to be a part of this process. It's been really, really great to see. And I want to introduce our Parks and Rec Director of Chaska, Marshall Grange.
Thanks, Danelle. It's been great to work with Danelle and all of the other task force members throughout this process. I remember actually, as I was listening to Danelle's story, thinking back of when we as staff actually interviewed the task force members, because we actually had quite a few people that were interested, so we actually had to interview people to narrow it down to 16 people to serve on the task force. And it was just so overwhelming and powerful to hear people's stories and how they relate to this community center and what this community center means to them and why they love to live in Chaska. And so for me, that's I take that with a lot of pride, and I come here every day trying to build community and make this a great facility for everybody to feel welcome and comfortable to be able to enjoy it. So thank you for coming. Today is our kind of a special day for us with this open house. The purpose of today is really to kind of loop back with the community and showcase what we've come up with based on the feedback that you've provided. So we've been at this a little over a year and a half, and we're going to kind of go through a presentation here, which will be really high level overview of the plan and talking a little bit about why we did the plan, some of the factors that went into it. And then from there, Chris with Perkins and Will, who is our consultant, is going to go through what's in the plan. And then we'll finish up with our city administrator, Matt Podorowski, reviewing the cost of the project, and then we'll finish with some next steps. We are going to reserve questions for after the presentation, in which we'll just transition back into the banquet room where we have the display boards. So if you haven't been there yet, we encourage everybody to go over there. We got a lot more detail and more members of our citizen task force there that are happy to engage with you and answer any other questions you might have. I also want to make mention too that the information we have here today is also going to be available online. So we're going to be working on that over the next couple days, and we'll put communication out where you'll have the ability to rewatch this video. You'll have access to all the different display boards, and then we're also working on a survey. So if you're one that likes to spend a little bit more time digging into it, there will be that opportunity to do that and share your thoughts with us. All right. So first of all, I really want to thank and acknowledge everybody that has been involved in this planning process. Like I mentioned, we had a citizen task force. It's a cross-section of our community that was appointed by our city council. And we've got a couple of city council members represented on the task force, in Jonathan Graw and Taylor Hubbard. We've got some representation from our various commissions. We've got some community center members, we've got non-members, and then just kind of a mix of people that we felt was a good representation of the Chaska community. And then throughout the project, we've developed a staff project team. And this is a variety of staff that work across all the different departments in the city of Chaska that have really been helpful in providing input because it really does require all that different levels of staff expertise to go into a project of this magnitude. And then working with our consultants, Perkins and Will, throughout the process. And that is their specialty, is designing sports and recreation community center type facilities across the country. And so the task force, we've really been kind of working on their behalf, throughout this, because we want to make sure that what we came up with was something that the task force felt comfortable with, that represented the community feedback that they can then bring forward to our Park and Rec Commission as a recommendation to go to our city council for approval. But I also too want to make mention that this is it's a master plan which is still in a concept phase. So that's why we're doing this open house. We want more feedback. We're really kind of wanting to understand, is this a good direction we're going in? Does the plan look like it's accounted for the feedback, and whether or not we've missed anything? So we'll want to go back and address any of that. So why did we do this plan? We started this, like I said, about a couple years ago, and it was when the community center had just turned a little over 30 years old. And so the facility was starting to show its age. There's quite a few deferred maintenance items that were coming up. And it was just an opportune time for us to think about this more holistically and create a vision for the future that allows us to be more sustainable from an operational standpoint, and also to account for just the change in trends. Over 30 years, recreational trends have changed, and our community's changed. We're more populated, we're more diverse. So we wanted to kind of wrap all those things into it and come up with a plan that can really create some excitement and reinvest back into this facility for the next 30 years here in Chaska. One thing I do want to point out too is I know you've heard a lot about the city of Chaska also reinvesting into other city facilities. So we're looking at public safety campus, we're looking at expansion of our municipal services building, and then a future remodel of City Hall. And this particular project here with the community center has been on a little bit of a different planning track, and that was really intentional. And a couple kind of factors go into that. The first one is that while those other city facilities and the staff in those departments are providing essential services out to the community, the buildings themselves really kind of relate more to the staff working within them. Whereas here in the community center, while I also feel this facility is providing an essential service to the community, the building here ultimately is what's serving the community. And so we wanted to make sure we were very thorough in the community engagement process to be able to reflect the community voice into the future plan. And then also we wanted to factor in a variety of different financing strategies or funding strategies as we navigate this process. And our city administrator will touch on that at the end of this presentation. So when we first got started in the planning process, working with the task force, we developed guiding principles and objectives right from the beginning. So it was important for us to create that foundation, and then our guiding principles and these objectives ultimately helped guide some of our decision-making process as we went forward. And I'm really excited about our guiding principles, and I'm actually going to read them off here because I think they're quite powerful. So we want to reinvest in the multi-purpose facility to continue serving as a community gathering place into the future. We want to welcome people of all cultural, economic backgrounds, ages, abilities, and interests to access a facility that improves the health and wellness of both individuals and the community. And then we want to be able to create experiences that builds community, fosters a sense of pride, and develops lifelong memories. So that's kind of the overarching theme that goes into why we're coming up with this plan. And then we came up with a whole list of different objectives, which I'm not going to go through all of these, but I want to touch on a few of them that I think are important to create some of the context that went into the plan. So we wanted to repurpose and or redesign underutilized areas of the building to maximize the space that already exists. This is a really large facility, and so we wanted to, before we think about just adding on to the building right from the get-go, we wanted to try to maximize what we have. We also want to design multi-use spaces that can meet the changing needs of the community into the future. So again, a little bit of that sustainability piece so we can adapt and change over time with more flexible space that's multi-purpose oriented. We wanted to continue to have an arts presence at the facility, which you're going to see in the plan. And I really like that. I think it sort of encompasses the idea that this is a community center, more so than just a recreation center. There's something here for everybody to come in and get involved with and socialize and engage with one another. So I think that's really cool. And then the other one that I think that stood out for me is this idea of connecting to nature by capturing the views of the Minnesota River Valley and designing outdoor spaces around the facility. So just the fact of this building and the location with the overview of the river bluff, how can we take more advantage of the backside of the building and the great views back there. So the factors that went into shaping the plan, like I said, community feedback was first and foremost. So when we started out, we had an original open house where we invited the community in and got a lot of great feedback from that event. We had a variety of surveys that went out to the community. We met with a lot of focus groups. So we sat down and talked with the AOAs from our lodge. We sat down and talked with the Youth Hockey Association. We sat down and talked with the church group that rents here every week. We met with the city managers from the neighboring communities here in Chaska. So really just tried to get a lot of input into this. And then it was from there, working with the task force to try to come up with what were the big themes that stood out from that community feedback for us to start developing priorities and how we were going to meet those objectives to create the plan. We also relied a lot on staff feedback. So our staff that work here day in, day out, they're really the experts, and they understand what programs are performing well and which ones aren't. Understanding the operational expenses and revenues, and some strategies for us to think about going forward. And then lastly, we looked at market demographics and demographic analysis. So the makeup of our community, from an age demographic, ethnic demographic, things like that. We also looked at the other types of recreational facilities within this region. And then lastly, we wanted to account for the national recreation trends that are out there, so that we're incorporating some of those things into this plan. So we took all that, and we think we came up with a good plan, but that's why we're here today, to get your feedback and go through it all. So from here, I'm now going to turn it over to Chris, who is our consultant, and he's going to go through the highlights of what we developed. Thanks, Chris.
All right. Good evening. So I think, as Marshall said, there were a lot of factors and a lot of guiding principles that sort of led to the way that we envisioned this project. And so we developed a pretty deliberate philosophy as to how we wanted to tackle it. And you've seen some of the boards in the other room, where if you have a really, they focus on sort of a three-legged stool of improvement, right? Take care of what we have first and foremost. Invest in what we have, make it come up to current standards. Secondly, improve on what we already do well. So look at the programs that are performing and either enhance them in certain ways, augment them in certain ways, but really build on what's working, right? We have 200,000 square feet of great community space. Let's harness that. And then, based on that sort of gap analysis, I don't want to make design boring, so I'm going to get over this really quick, but take that analysis and then understand really what do we need to add, what do we need to improve, and what do we need to augment the current programs with, so that we can see the next 30 or 40 years of the Chaska Community Center succeed. So we looked at some base improvements, and again, I want to get to the fun stuff. I promise I won't bore you to death, but some of these things are basics that we just have to take care of. Leaky roofs, if you can see up into there, better mechanical systems, improving some of the equipment and finishes, technology, all the things that go into running a modern 200,000 square foot community center. And so this is day one. This is something that has to happen, because this is deferred maintenance that's taken 30 years to sort of reach. The second thing we heard a bunch about was the site. We wanted to talk a lot about the building, but a lot of the comments that came from community feedback focused on the site, lack of parking, unsafe drop-off, confusing circulation patterns. And so we looked at the basic location of the site, and we tried to understand how can we improve on this. It's got about 499 spaces between the community center and the neighboring school. Based on these improvements, we see a need or demand not only current day to increase parking, but also to expand that based on these new uses. So we looked at a plan that starts to improve the circulation, clarify the circulation, minimize some of the cutouts within the parking, meaning fewer decision points, because decision points in parking planning mean unsafe conditions. People are looking instead of paying attention. The second thing we did was we improved the drop-off to a single central entry, and then everything in blue represents added parking, everything in green or pale yellow represents improved circulation. And you'll see this in a minute when I talk about the hockey, but we've also talked about adding an entry for the new hockey at the far north end of the building. So what you'll see is a site that's vastly improved, has nearly 100 additional parking spaces within the vicinity, is safer and is more well laid out from a wayfinding standpoint. So now we get to the architecture. This is the fun part. First and foremost, we wanted to look at the spaces that we think we need to improve, and then look at the spaces that we want to expand. And down this list, you can see the things that we want to improve: the lockers, the lobby, pool, ice rinks, theater, meeting rooms, the lodge. Things that we want to expand, the things that really need to grow to serve new programs: gymnasium, fitness, the indoor playground, multi-purpose spaces, and finally some of those art and innovation and creative spaces that Marshall mentioned. So the thing I'll note, if we want to talk about this big color plan, if it's in color, we're changing it, we're touching it. So you can see, just based on the vastness of this plan, there's a lot that goes into these improvements that we're presenting. That's the main level, and on the lower level, again, you can see this study really impacts almost every area of this building. So the first thing we wanted to look at was the lobby. We have some challenges with the lobby. If you want a safe facility, a safe community facility, you should have interaction with the staff member when you come in the front door. And right now, we kind of sneak past the desk. Let's all be honest. We all kind of just walk past and go in and do what we want to do. We need to change that layout so that staff will interact with everyone that comes through this door in a more purposeful way. We have a control point that will allow them to actually interface as you go into what we call the pay-to-play zone, or as people interact and come down the other corridor to the more community services zone. We're talking about moving that stair because that really breaks that control. People can kind of come in and sneak down without really interfacing. We're moving that stair behind control. So now if you want to experience the vastness of this building, you've passed by a point by which staff has interacted with you, if it's nothing more than saying hello. It also improves the gathering areas too. So right now the gathering spaces are sort of scattered throughout that lobby, but by improving that, we've allowed us to have a lot more opportunities for gathering in and around this lobby that aren't sort of within the circulation patterns. And you can see sort of a larger, more welcoming front desk experience, reception experience. The other thing we looked at improving was the locker rooms. I'm not even going to ask for a show of hands because I probably know the answer. No one's comfortable in locker rooms, let's be honest. But improving them is important to the function of a good community center. Having welcoming, warm, well-lit locker rooms that are clean and fresh. And so one of the things we talked about was a more efficient layout for the locker rooms. Expanding the equitability of locker rooms and the inclusivity so that we have a large family change or gender equitable change area. That sits right here in the middle of the locker rooms. And we've also added new fitness-oriented locker rooms. So these are more club style. They're dry locker rooms. They're not the wet tiled rooms. These would be more focused on the fitness center and gymnasium uses. So now you have two choices of where you might want to use to change in this building. Again, bright, fresh, clean, modern. Big move on this section of the building is improvements to the ICE lobby. One of the comments we heard was the ICE lobby is constricted, there's not a lot of queuing area, the locker rooms are tiny, the concessions are small, everything about that area was really congested. So we came up with the idea that that north wing of the building that's currently a tenant space would actually become the new entry to the ICE rink facility. So not only does that give us a new drop-off point that's not as congested as the one that's currently too close to the other main entry, it allows us to have a large entry lobby that's dedicated to ICE, large office space with a check-in, skate rental, concessions, large locker rooms, and good viewing of the ICE, as well as access to the second sheet without having to go through the entire facility to get there. So vast improvement to the services of the ICE rink and ICE programs. Next was the pool, right? We looked at the pool. This is the space in a building that you'll spend the most money improving, the most money operating, and the most money maintaining. So we have to do this space right. We didn't look at a huge expansion to the aquatics area because it's got plenty of opportunity for amenity. But we did look at cleaning up a lot of the things that we heard were problematic. One of those is the slide tower. It takes up a lot of space. It creates poor circulation, difficult lifeguarding. The second thing was that elevated hot tub. And so we did a couple things. First, we added a small addition to the building that includes a large flat hot tub that sits and looks right out at the view, right along the glass. We moved the majority of the slide to the exterior so that you encapsulate the tower inside, but the actual flume of the slide goes outside and comes back in. Again, taking a lot of that sort of heavy lift stuff and bringing it outside the building. So once we did that, it allowed us to rethink the way that this leisure pool works. And now you can see nothing is impacting that interior lap pool. It can now function like a lap pool. Or if lap swimming isn't happening, it can function for lessons, aqua aerobics, and all the other functions that happen in there when it's not acting as a slide pool. So these are the big improvements to the aquatic, and that'll include new features like a lazy river and play structures and a vortex, but it'll also include vastly improved open deck space and better access to the exterior. This space, the theater, we feel like this is a wonderful, beautiful space in this building. It's vastly underutilized. It's really appropriate for theater events. It's a wonderful acoustic environment with technology and great comfortable seating. But when it's not being used for theater events, it's generally closed down. So our proposal is to flatten the floor of this space, leave the stage, but remove the permanent seating. It can still function as a theater event with temporary seating, just like this, but it'll have more opportunity for special events, banquets, meetings, and during the day, it can actually be set up more as a casual cafe, right? This is a space you can come and gather. Think of it kind of like a second lodge. So we think this space can open up a lot of its opportunity and better utilization through having more flexibility. Some of the meeting room improvements, and this applies to both the meeting rooms that we were just in, the red brick room, as well as the lodge. These improvements don't change the functionality. They just are upgrades to the finishes and just bringing up kind of the facelift of those spaces. So that's where we've invested some of the thought there, just making the meeting rooms in the lodge feel more current and give them a 30-year refresh. And not to mention capture those great views. And then technology upgrades are also really important. Again, in the 30 years this building's been operating, technology would go a long way to improve some of the programming within our meeting and gathering areas. The gymnasium expansion, this is probably one of the most significant increases in area to the building. So I'll explain what we're proposing here. We're taking the existing large gymnasium that sits on the lower level, and we're constructing a mezzanine level to basically raise that gymnasium up to the level of the auxiliary gym on the main floor. In doing so, we now have a single contiguous flat floor gymnasium. That allows us to have things like leagues and more organized or programmatic uses as opposed to just drop-in, because now we have contiguous use of courts. We're also proposing adding a significant addition to the east of the gymnasium, so expanding the gymnasium uses. This allows us to better accommodate things like pickleball, multi-sport activities, volleyball, badminton, and of course basketball. But that basically increases the gymnasium by nearly 6,000 square feet and gives us a lot more access to better programming. By doing that, we allow ourselves now to have more space underneath where that gym currently sits. We've lifted that floor up to the main level, and now we have that space we can fill in, and that allows us to have all this new fitness space as well as those new locker rooms to fill in under that area, expand our equipment offerings. Now we don't have to use such a tight space to pack with equipment. We can have proprietary fitness, we can have boot camps, a wellness focused. Like Danelle talked about, this is the kind of thing that really draws a broader usership to your fitness, health, and wellness programs. It's not just a weight room anymore. It now becomes a multifaceted health and wellness amenity. And so the other thing we really thought is that should take advantage of the views as well. So as you can imagine, this whole facade would be transparent out to those views. And so I'll point out, this is the other space that we create once we lift that gym. I'm going to show an image. That's sort of the bright open fitness space, bright open group exercise spaces. But now we also create this, what we're calling a multi-purpose recreational space. Think of this as kind of a field house type of space. Resilient rubberized flooring, multi-sport uses. So this might be where you would have dodgeball or laser tag or anything else you can think of that isn't a traditional court space. Could also be used for sports training and practice. And so the whole purpose of that is creating a secondary multi-purpose recreational space similar to a gym, but expanded to different uses. The area that's currently occupied by the offices, if staff administrative offices move, this can now become an art, culture, creation, and innovation space. So this is thinking about things like robotics, maker space, esports, all the things that you're seeing youth and teens focusing on a STEM environment would be looking for in this building. A lot of school programs are doing this, but a lot of them also fall short due to crowding and amenities. So we think this is a great program for youth all the way through a multi-generational age use. And then also focusing on arts and crafts as well, as Marshall said. We're also talking about expanding the indoor playground. This more than doubles the size of the playground, but not just becoming larger. The idea here is that this becomes more of a regional destination. So it's not just the small play place, this becomes a true themed, immersive indoor playground environment. It's accessible right from the main entry. This is a great place for parties, rentals. We also located the sensory room in this area because we feel like this area with all those youth and sort of intense activities might be a good place to have that sort of calming environment for those users who may need that. And you can see kind of an image of what that might look like. So that sort of summarizes the plan in its purpose, the program, the expansion, and how we re-envision the spaces. Now I'm going to introduce Matt Pobrowski, your city administrator, to explain the costs.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for coming tonight. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate especially our task force members who have been involved in this for the last year and a half. It's great to hear stories like Danelle shared tonight to talk about some of the things that we want to change and expand in the community center to make it more accessible to more people in the community. We heard a very similar message from one of our one of our members this morning. Her name's Ellie, and she talked about how she came from Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and how that's a city that's significantly larger than Chaska, and they didn't have a facility like this. And how special it was for her to move up after living in that city after 38 years and come into a community like Chaska that's about a quarter of the size, and she's like, holy moly, what kind of amenity do we have here to be able to utilize as residents? So our task force members from bottom to top have all those types of stories that can talk about why this facility is important to them and why it's so important for us to invest into this. This is our central gathering place. This is where our families get together. I was a Cub master for years, and this space up here, I can't tell you how many programs that I went through to have kids cross over a bridge to get their badge to go to the next year. I mean, this is truly a place where memories are made for kids as they go forward. Now, unfortunately, I'm always the one that has to be the guy that comes up and like everybody else gets to talk about vision, I get to talk about money. Nobody wants to hear about money. But it's something we have to look at and understand. And so one of the things that when we went through this program is we looked at, first of all, a cost summary and sort of breaking this into functional areas of what we could really look at as far as how we address these improvements. So one of the things that Chris talked about right off the bat is there's just things that we need to do from a deferred maintenance that just need to happen to take care of this facility. And so, that's things like the roof, things like addressing piping in restrooms, the hot tub that's no longer working, all those different types of things. So you can see up here, that makes up about $23 million of the total cost just to deal with those things that we just absolutely need to deal with. From that, we broke it into different areas. So functional improvements would include those locker rooms in the lobby. That makes up about $4.1 million of the estimate. The proposed renovations, so this would be like the gymnasium and fitness center, the pool, ice arena, the meeting and youth areas, the arts and technology space, the lodge. Those would all make up about $32 million of a program. And then the proposed addition, this would be if we added an additional gym outside and then the fitness center space underneath, that would be about $10 million. And I should point out that these are not this year's dollars, this is 2027 dollars. So we took this year's dollars and we basically expanded them out to 2027 because that's the year that we're targeting to try to move forward with improvements in this so that we're able to plan for this. So we've done a lot of work looking at what are some different options for funding. I can tell you that this is work that's going to continue to go on, but what I can tell you at this point is we have a few different options to look at as a community, and one of the things that really sticks large, I know, in the council's mind and my mind is, we've had to, because of a growing community, work on expanding our facilities, our other general fund facilities, things that we absolutely have to do to be able to keep our essential services moving forward. So knowing that, we wanted to make sure that any type of improvements that we did in here would have little additional impact to the average resident as far as paying. So I can tell you, while we don't have the final solution yet, some of the concepts that at least I'm working on would be able to say that we would not have to go past what our normal tax levy policy would be to be able to afford to move forward with these improvements. So basically we'd be able to sort of continue forward with sort of our normal policy to be able to improve that. And there's even some options with some development opportunities coming into town, especially with our electric utility, that maybe we don't have to tap into any of our resources to do that, but instead be able to tap into some of the resources that new development is bringing in. So again, the goal is we want this to be something that is easy for people to say, yes, we really need to do this. We think it's great that it's not going to have this major economic impact on us to do it, and it makes it easy for us to go forward and do the right things. So we'll have more information as we move forward and get things finalized, and I can certainly talk more about this and explain that more back in the meeting room when we get out there and talk a little bit more in details about that. But I think it's important just for people to know that is, keeping this something that's not going to be a burden for residents financially, but also getting it done within a timely manner. So again, 2027 is when we're aiming for, is really an important objective for us to meet, and will be something that we'll be working on. So with that being said, I'll turn it back over to Marshall, who will just wrap things up.
All right. Thanks, Matt. So I'm just going to touch real briefly on what our next steps are. So as I mentioned, we're going to make this information available online for those who couldn't make it today to be able to look at the information and provide feedback, as well as if you want to go back and look at that further and provide feedback. From there, we're going to take that and revisit with the task force and account for what we heard. Is there anything major that we missed that we heard as a part of this open house process? After that, we will then work with Perkins and Will to finalize the master plan report, and then that report will go through to the Park and Rec Commission for their recommendation to City Council for approval for us to start taking the next steps. And then, as Matt said, in the background, there will be the continuation of determining the funding strategy to make this project a reality. We'll also then need to embark on the architectural design drawings and construction drawings and creating those documents, which, that itself can be a 12 to 18 month process, all with the goal, like we just said, of trying to get this project started in the year 2027. So hope you enjoyed the presentation. thanks for coming, and we will meet you back out in the banquet room and assist with any questions you have. We also have some ice cream out there too, so if you didn't grab an ice cream, that's a little bit of a treat on your way out as a thank you. Thank you.